Hello, good people of YouTube. Welcome to episode 51 of What Makes This Song Special. As always, every week I take a song, I tell you what it means to me, why is it special to me, what does it take me back to, a wee story sometimes, a funny one, a sad one. I then talk a wee bit about the song and the singer of the song, and then I do a part two where I cover the song. This week I don't have to cover the song because covering is when you do a version of somebody else's song. This week it is one of my own songs. The song's called Chapters. A little bit of a different episode today. I've toyed with the idea of doing one of my own songs for quite a while now. It's not because I think my songs are special or more special than other people's songs, but of course they're special to me, and that's the whole point in the episodes. And the reason that I'm wearing the green shirt today, this is the only green garment that I could find, is because today is the last day of Lyme Disease Awareness Month. And for those of you who tune in regularly to the show, I have mentioned a couple of times before that I'm a long-term chronic sufferer of said illness. But I'll talk a wee bit about Lyme disease today. I won't bore people with lots of information. You can get that on various websites, which I will talk about at the end of the show. But yeah, just obviously a subject close to my heart, and of course, being the last day of Lyme Disease Awareness Month, I wanted to do something that would, discuss and raise awareness for Lyme disease. So I'm going to go back to 2016 first today. 2016, I released a song called Getting Better. It was a song of hope, bravery, affirmations that I would, as the title alludes to, get better. It was written at a really low point for me in my Lyme disease journey. A couple of years before its release, I started to I wrote the song quite quickly, but I was probably not in a great place when I wrote it, but I was reading about affirmations and the power of the mind and all that kind of stuff at the time, and it came from a kind of place of desperation, but also a belief that that this wouldn't last forever. And there is an episode where I talk about the first time that I found, or when I found out that I had Lyme and stuff. It's the Bruce Springsteen Thunder Road episode, I believe. I'll leave a wee link if you want to hear more of the kind of beginning of the journey. I talk a wee bit about that in that episode. Getting Better, when I released it, it was the first single from my album called Auditory Dreams. And when it was released, there were people contacting me from all over the world telling me about their own chronic health stories, not just Lyme stories, but things like ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, various autoimmune diseases, things that doctors had told me I had, or they thought I had, before I got my Lyme diagnosis. And these people, like me, felt that they'd been kind of forgotten by the health world, the health community, and sort of just left to rot and suffer with no kind of clear road to recovery. And I was blown away by the response it got. It was quite a positive pop song, if you like, and I was getting messages from people, as I said, all over the place, and it was really touching, and it was really encouraging that people were feeling something emotive from something that I'd written. I remember, and if I never forget, I got this email one day shortly after I released the song from a woman. I think she was from like Uruguay or Venezuela, I can't remember. But she had messaged me to thank me, and she'd said she hadn't left her house for months, and then she heard my song and the words, and it just gave her the power to walk to her local shops just to buy milk and bread or whatever it was. And I was just like blown away. I remember reading that and like having tears in my eyes reading the message from her, to think that somebody across the other side of the world had heard my song and it had made a difference to her. So amazing, great response, very happy at the time, and it kind of made me feel like those 5 or 6 years at the time of suffering had some sort of purpose, which was great. The album was released around about the same time, and the album at the time, Auditory Dreams, was all about like soul searching and meditation and finding yourself and all that stuff, and struggling. I suppose the good that the Lyme disease had done to me sounds like a strange thing to say, but that sort of Nietzsche idea that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And the album had a bit of a message of that throughout. It was about me becoming a man, an adult, and sort of navigating the fears that I had when I was younger, realising how strong and independent I'd become from this terrible experience of dealing with this horrible chronic illness when I was still a very young man. And I was proud of how I'd faced up to it at the time. I'd kind of proud of myself, one of those moments. I'd survived some really low, desperate points, which I won't go into and sort of bore you with, and we don't have to play the smallest violin in the world, but at that point I felt like I'd sort of truly reached maybe 70% of my health back again, which was a real high point, I suppose. 70% doesn't maybe seem a lot to many people, but when you've been what you felt was rock bottom, 70% felt like I was almost back. And there were still ups and downs at that point on that kind of roller coaster ride of symptoms, but things were mostly manageable. And yeah, things looked like they were on the way up. And then unfortunately, and I wasn't to know, but in 2019, things would kind of reach lows that I couldn't even have imagined. So just a dreadful year, horrible neurological symptoms, coupled with sort of the utter terror that I had some sort of wasting disease, led to tests for multiple sclerosis and other illnesses of that type. I had to wait months to get results back. So just limbo again, and waiting to find out, what you were expecting to be bad news, judging by what I'd been told by the doctors and things like that. It came back that, again, it wasn't any of those things. It was good old Lyme disease again, just changing the goalposts and just changing the symptoms and just doing what it does best and messing with your physical body and mind. And so all these new symptoms, neurological symptoms, appeared from nowhere. And I was sort of pushed back onto my knees, trying to find a way to pull myself back up again. I felt like at the time I'd climbed this mountain to about 3/4 of the way up. Having fallen so many times, but maybe not right to the bottom. Each time sort of falling and then trying to climb again and again and again. And there's only so often and so many times you can do that before it starts to get very difficult. And of course, all of a sudden I woke up again and the progress had been, like a dream. And I was right back at the foot of the mountain again, wondering if I even had it in me to think about starting to climb it again. And that was a low point. It was the lowest point of the journey so far. I hope there aren't any low points anywhere near as low as that. And I don't want to go too deep into a big sad story. I'm not looking for sympathy here. This is about raising awareness. But when we raise awareness, we have to, I suppose, talk a wee bit about the severity of what we're talking about. And so on a day where I just honestly couldn't face going on, when the fear was at its worst and I just couldn't find any energy in me to fight, I slumped down at my piano, and not with any intention of writing a song, I started to write this song called Chapters. And it's not as uplifting as Getting Better was. Getting Better is very uplifting. It's a real kind of powerful, I'm going to win the fight kind of song. But it's darker. It's a much darker song, as you will hear if you click part 2 at the end. It was from a darker place. But as I wrote it, the strangest thing happened. I started to sort of imagine a moment where I could sing this song and talk about how I'd won this ugly fight. This was me talking about, thinking ahead and thinking, right, one day I'm going to sing this song and I'm going to talk about this song from a much happier, more victorious point. And by the time I got to the chorus, I was using words that were synonymous with fighting and victory and all that type of stuff. Words that weren't in my dictionary 10 minutes before I sat down to write it. I was sort of empowered by the whole process, and the song just came out of me. It wrote itself in less than half an hour, and something changed in me in that half an hour. I wasn't cured. I'm still not cured. That's a whole other story. But it gave me the fight back. It gave me my fight back. It gave me a moment where I was like, I'm going to just keep pushing on. I have to keep pushing on. There's no other alternative, really. It just made me want to write another album. It made me want to write a book, something that documented my journey, my pain. Not an uplifting album. an album of truths. I'm not saying it's like super depressing, but it's certainly not an uplifting pop album. But for once, I wasn't really caring about writing catchy songs that would be on the radio. I wasn't thinking, oh, this needs to be 3 minutes because it's got to be played and whatever. I don't care about that stuff anymore at all. This album was for me. It was dealing with all of the struggles that I've had in my life, even pre-Lyme struggles, anxiety, all sorts of things. And it was just dealing with being a bit of an artist, which can be a tricky thing at times. I think all of us artists will sort of admit to the fact that there are ups and downs of being an artist. Certainly, you think a lot when you're an arty type of person. And I don't mean painting art, because I can't paint to save my life, but musicians, creative people, we kind of tend to be quite emotional, and so yeah, dealing with all of those struggles is what the album's going to be about. So anyway, today's song is one of my own. It's called Chapters, as I said, and it will be on my upcoming album. Nobody's heard this until today, even though I've had it written for nearly 4 years now. And the album's going to be called The Solitude of the Poet. This isn't an advert for the album. I'll advertise the album properly when it's ready. I'm hoping I can get it mixed and released at some point this year, because it's been kind of finished since lockdown 2020, and I just haven't really put the final magical sprinkles on it yet. So hopefully at some point this year. But this song, I'll leave a link here or here at the very end. And I'll warn you, as I said, it's not a pop song like Getting Better was. This is quite a complex song. It's complex musically, like the world of chronic illness is complex. I don't know if I meant to do that, but even though it's in A flat, which for any non-piano players out there, it's not the easiest of keys to play in, and it changes key a couple of times as well and messes around with lots of strange, obscure, inverted shapes, and it's not a pop song, as I said. But it seems to just flow out of me, this song. It seems to be as sort of cheesy and corny as it sounds. I feel like I'm just able to be at like one with the piano. So me and the piano become this one entity, and the song just flows from there. So so there we go. The title of today's video was How Do We Deal with Lyme? And I think we all deal with it in our own way, because there isn't really a definitive, pill. Here, take this and you'll get better, especially when it's chronic. Of course, if you have an acute infection of Lyme disease, you need to get to the doctor immediately and get some antibiotics and things like that. There are lots of links that I will leave at the end if you ever wanted to know more about that, which you should look into. But yeah, how do we deal with Lyme? That was my question at the start. I've tried many ways to deal with it, a million different treatments to deal with it physically. But for me, emotionally, trying to deal with it, sometimes using music as an outlet for all of that pain and anxiety and just devastation that it causes. For me, it's to create something emotive, wear my heart on my sleeve and sort of let go of something that's inside me. And that sometimes makes me feel better. That's how I deal with it. As always, I will be back, hopefully with a happier story next week, one that doesn't deal with chronic health, maybe a funny story, maybe I'll come up with something funny for you. But thanks so much, as always, for tuning in. Please watch the song, Here or Here, Chapters, leave some comments, and thank you so much for listening.